Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our online information system, online information for the Department of Political Science. My name is Christopher Fernandez, and I'll allow Arjun to go ahead and start with our land acknowledgement.
Good morning. UBC's Point Grey campus is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. The land it is situated on has always been a place of learning for the Musqueam people, who for millennia have passed on in their culture, history, and traditions from one generation to the next on the site. Just to orient you, events at UBC, particularly external-facing events like this, we begin with this acknowledgement to give you a sense of the history and the continuing relationships in the community of which the university is part. So that's why we do this for those of you who are not from BC.
So just a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. Please turn off all your microphones during the presentation just to reduce our ambient noise. This recording would be, this session will be recorded, but will only be distributed to applicants who are unable to attend the session. You may turn off your cameras as well if you want to remain anonymous. And at some point, if you have any questions, just feel free to type in the chat box and we'll return to it later at the end of the session. And just going through the agenda here. So we'll have our introductions and a little bit about UBC and the Department of Political Science. We'll also touch base a little bit about the fields of study and research, and then Arjun will cover the MA and PhD program overview. We'll also talk about some of our graduate career outcomes, and lastly, the application requirements. Since we only have like an hour for this session, we'll try to breeze through it in about like half an hour because we want you to have a Q&A portion at the end to answer any questions that you may have. And I'll let Arjun introduce himself.
Okay. My name is Arjun Chaudhary. I'm an associate professor in the department here. My research is in international relations, and I'm the director of the graduate program.
And my name is Christopher Fernandez, and I am the graduate program coordinator, and I guide graduate students from the admissions to the graduation phase. So this is just an overview of UBC. We call that UBC at a glance. And this is just to show sort of like the magnitude that UBC as a university has. So we have about 66,000 students, and 18,000 of them are from our international students, right? And we're also ranked 37th in the 2022 Times Higher Education. And we are tied first in Canada in industry and innovation and infrastructure in the United Nations sustainability goals. In terms of our department, we currently have 46 PhD students, and 48 of them are MA students. We have a very robust number of international students. 44% of them are international students. And we have 36 tenured and tenure track faculty. We also have related centers and institutes. And what this means is that if any of your research is centered around
Chris, one second.
Yeah.
These questions in the chat we'll get to later. Okay, so
That's
you
right.
can post them, but we'll only answer them later. Just FYI.
Yeah. So going back to the centers are in themselves sort of like research hubs, right? And if any of your research is centered around any of these areas, then you would have the resources in the university that would help you. So, for example, the Center of Migration, Center of Study of Democratic Institutions, Asian research. So those are closely affiliated centers. And in fact, our faculty teach in these, teach and also direct these centers. And we also have sort of like affiliates in uh, Institute of Gender, Race and Sexuality and Social Justice, and Institute for Research, Environment and Sustainability. And there are also opportunities for internships, especially for IRES. We also have a sister program, which is the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs. And we have regular faculty also teaching courses in the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs. And I'll give it to Arjun for the MA program overview.
Thank you, Chris. Can I think you have to move me through, Chris, because the slides are on your computer.
I'll go ahead and move
Okay.
you through.
Yeah. Okay. So our MA program is a one-year program, and it really has two components. In the 2 semesters, which is September through December, and then January through end April, you will have to take 6 courses over these 2 semesters. So 6 courses are total. And then over the summer, that is May through the end August, you are expected to write an MA thesis, which is 8,000 to 12,000 words, give or take. And more than half of our students finish in 1 year. So that is the program, our structure. And the MA program, basically, you have a choice of just any classes in the department. You just have to take most of them in the department, 4 out of 6. So just to give you a sense, like most big North American departments, we like most big American departments, we offer the 4 main subfields in political science, which are political theory, comparative politics, international relations, and American politics. As we are a Canadian department, we also offer Canadian politics as a subfield. And in fact, our Canadian politics subfield is significantly bigger than the American politics subfield, which makes sense. We're in Canada. But we are also have opportunities to work with faculty and take classes outside the department, FNIS, which is First Nations Indigenous Studies, Public Policy, and so on. And our students, in fact, often will take, they can take max of 2 classes outside the department, and they will take, at least, they often take a class outside the department in any of these departments. So this gives us a timeline, right, that looks like this. In the fall term, I should have said, as part of our funding package, you get a TA-ship every semester over your 2 terms. You're guaranteed 2 TA-ships as an MA student. So in the fall term, you will take 3 courses and you will serve as a TA or teaching assistant. In the spring term, again, 3 courses and be a TA. And then finally, in the summer term and going into the summer proper, you will be doing a thesis ideally built on a seminar paper, which then once your supervisor approves it, you will go to a thesis defense, which is basically you present your thesis for 15 minutes, and then there'll be Q&A for another hour or so. So that's the timeline here. Our funding packages, there's tuition of about 9,000 for international students and 6,000 for domestic. We don't give you a tuition award, but we do offset the cost to some degree by offering you a TA-ship in each term. And the TA-ship is about $6,500 a semester. So that adds up to close to 13,000 over the year. International students will receive from from graduate and postdoctoral studies an international student tuition award, which is about 3,000. And the goal of that is to equalize the tuition cost to about 6,000. Domestic students may apply for funding from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. These are called the CGSM Awards, the Canada Graduate Scholarship Awards. And that is in addition to whatever funding we provide should you win it. And then there's also various conference support through the department, which MA students are eligible to apply for.
Sorry.
That's fine. So let me now move to the PhD program requirements. The PhD program is obviously there's more coursework. There's twice as much coursework. There's 12 courses. And I'm not going to get into the details of this, but they're actually, unlike the MA program, depending on your subfield, there are specific courses you have to take. So our MA students basically can choose any 6 courses they want. This is not true for the PhD program. We won't get into details of this for reasons of time, but I'm just you want to be clear that we can't do. You don't have a lot of flexibility. I mean, you don't have as much flexibility as the MA students have. After you finish your coursework, 12 courses over generally 2 years, you sit for what is called a comprehensive exam. And should you pass that, the comprehensive exam is a written exam, which takes place, it's about 6 hours. You have to answer 3 questions. If you pass that, you go to an oral exam, which you're examined for 2 hours on your knowledge of your subfield, political, international relations, comparative politics, etc. Then you have to write what is called a 649 or dissertation prospectus. And that, once you pass that, you are then allowed to write your dissertation. Okay. And the first 3 steps have to happen according to UBC rules within 36 months. So within 3 years, you have to finish your coursework, pass your exams, and defend your prospectus or 649. Once you finish all these things within 3 years, you can move on to your dissertation completion. You're writing your dissertation, doing your research, and defending. So what the timeline for the PhD, unlike the MA, which is 1 year, the PhD is longer, and this is what it looks like. In your first 2 years, you will be doing your coursework, those 12 courses, and you will be generally serving as a teaching assistant, a research assistant. For the most part, the first year, to ease the transition to the PhD program, we don't require PhDs to TA. So the funding for the first year is mostly fellowship money, and that's designed for you to really focus on your coursework and get accustomed to life as a researcher. In year 3, you take the exam, you do your dissertation prospectus, and your funding is in the form of TA-ship RA work. Years 4 and 5, you are really working on research. And research is both doing the data gathering or fieldwork for your dissertation, but also you should be writing papers that you present at conferences and send to journals for publication. And this concludes, for the most part, the students are expected to finish in 6 years, at which point they are defending their dissertation, they are applying for jobs, and they are really transitioning to being no longer students, but full-time researchers. And I should add that most of our students want to become academics or full-time researchers. And that is, in fact, where most of them end up. But we'll talk more about that briefly. So what is the funding for the PhD? Unlike most Canadian programs, we guarantee fundings. We guarantee funding for the first 5 years. Most Canadian programs are guaranteed for 4, but we guarantee it for 5. So you can expect about, depending on some details, about 30 to 35 grand factoring in tuition for 5 years. In year 6, there's some opportunity to get more funding, but it varies. It's not guaranteed. Students who have Canadian citizenship or permanent residency are required to apply for funding from Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council every year until they secure funding or they are no longer eligible. So that's very important. You are expected to apply for funding from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. In addition to this, we do have internal department funding for going to conferences or supporting your research. Let's say for your dissertation, you need to run a survey. There is some department funding which can offset that. So we do offer a fair amount of support for research, conferences, and so on, as well as living costs through the time of your program. Okay. Yeah, so I already said this. So Chris, we can move through this one.
And now I'll be talking about some of the outcomes for our PhD. And for the PhD in particular, uh, our students have placed in tenure or tenure track positions in these universities. And I won't mention them all, but you can just see on the list that we have very good placements within Canada and also internationally. Um, and at the very bottom here, you could see that we also placed postdocs. And I think for especially for PhD studies, the postdoc placement is to be expected, right? There are some students who do get placed at a tenure track immediately after graduating, but for the most part, the expectation for most would be that they would go through a postdoc um, first before getting offered a tenure track position. Now, there are also non-academic placement outcomes for a PhD. Sometimes a PhD student would have the intention of working, for example, in government. We have one, for example, who's working for the UN currently, and a PhD is definitely an asset to have in being placed in these organizations because they would have the hard skills um, to be able to do data analysis or policy analyses for these international organizations or government organizations. We've also placed in the private sector, for example. One is, for example, like a VP at Deutsche Bank. So those are varied placements. Now, for our MA career outcomes, of course, I think about 40% of them would try to pursue a PhD in political science. About 33% to 40% is the last time that I've checked our data on this. And they get placed, of course, either in the US or here in Canada or also internationally. The majority do work in government and policy related positions. And it for especially if you're wanting a policy analyst job, having an MA is definitely a an asset. And I think for most of them now, it's slowly becoming the requirement that you would have a at least an MA degree for a policy job. Now we also have placements in NGOs, think tank, and corporate positions. Some have gone to do MBA or law school as well. A small percentage, I think about 5%. And
Huh.
some just landed also in academic administration. Um, Now I'll talk about a little bit about the student experience. And first, we look at the academic opportunities. Now, the good thing about the department, in particular with poli-sci, is that there's a very close working relationship with our faculty and staff. We do offer department professional workshops um, uh, that's centralized, for example, and that's through the Faculty of Graduate Studies. And we also have in-house workshops, and these are run by our own faculty. For example, PhD pathways workshops, academic and non-academic pathways workshops, publications workshops, to name a few. And there are also the offerings for subfield workshops. For example, if you've specialized in comparative or Canadian, we have something that's called a CompCan colloquium. We have also like an international relations colloquium, and they invite speakers within that subfield to speak about particular topics. We also have a speaker series. So the speaker series is different from the subfield workshops. They tend to be sort of like big ticket speakers, right? And sometimes they pertain to large scale issues. Like last year, um, or rather earlier this year, we've had a speaker on uh, Russia, like the war in Ukraine. There's also the Zacher speaker series that is open for both. Uh, that's open to the community, and these are we try to invite either academics or sometimes people who've worked uh, intensively in the government to share their points of views, right? We also have an annual graduate student conference. Now, this is a student-run conference just by the PSGSA, the Political Science Graduate Student Association. And this gives the opportunity for current graduate students to have a sort of like a mini conference for them to have an experience of how it is to present in a conference. And we also have the co-op opportunity. Arjun, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, so this is a new program we have started this year. And what it is, the Faculty of Arts runs this, but what happens is local employers, generally the city of Vancouver, BC government, approach the Faculty of Arts saying, look, we want people who can who can be an internship, work over the summer for us. And we ask our students to apply through us to them. And these are paid positions if selected. You work for 4 months, you're decently paid for 20 hours full time through the summer. And this is the first year we're doing it. About more than half of our entering MA class, 11 out of 19, have applied. And we are excited. We are hoping that this will be another pathway to well-paid, interesting employment for our students.
Yeah, and going back again to the student experience, we do have a student organization, the graduate student organization, which is the PSGSA. We also have social gatherings. So the PSGSA, in coordination with the department, we have social gatherings to involve the faculty, graduate students, and staff. There are also writing groups. So the writing groups are in practice now they're subdivided by the subfield. So if you are, for example, if you're in political theory, there is a political theory writing group. We also have study rooms for graduate students. We have 2 rooms for that. There's also the TA union. The TA union is basically because for MA students and for PhD, for all graduate students, really, you at some point you will become a TA. So the TA union is your sort of like your representative if you have any sort of like TA issues or anything like that. And I think the going to the quality of life portion here, Vancouver is a very I guess habitable is the adjective. It's a very beautiful city, and it's one of the very rare places in the world where you could go mountaineering and then go kayaking on the same day, right? You can go climb up a mountain in the morning and then go to the ocean in the afternoon. So
Not
the
that you
landscape is
should.
beautiful. Yeah,
And our students are studying all the time, so they aren't doing that. Nah, I'm joking. I'm joking. On their days off, they can do that.
yeah. And I guess with that, we can go to the application requirements and the admission criteria. So essentially, or rather, what are we looking for potential students, right? First would be relevant academic background. Now, when we say relevant academic background, and a background in social sciences is important, right? Sometimes we do get a background, say, what if I have like a background in history, or what if I have a background in psychology, for example? Well, that's fine, right? Especially at the MA stage, at the master's level, we do we do consider a wide range of background. If you're applying for PhD, it's a little bit more specific, right? So when you're applying for PhD studies, we want to see a stronger background in political science or social sciences. Now, for the MA especially, it's a first class GPA in the first 2 years of study or the last 2 years of study is rather very important. Now, we say the last 2 years because we do understand that when you're starting in university, sometimes you're still adjusting. And so we look at the senior years and we sort of isolate that and see if you're hitting the first class requirement. You will also be required to send in a statement of intent. Now, a statement of intent is really sort of like a 101 about yourself, why you are interested in pursuing an MA or a PhD program, and what your research interests are, and essentially what is the outcome for you. What do you plan to do with your graduate degree? And the statement of intent usually is around, 500 words, so about a pager and a half. We also require three academic letters of references. We prefer academic letters of references, especially if you're applying for the PhD program, then we really want academic letters of references. Now, someone would ask, well, what if I only have professional references? And, it's for the MA studies, if your current job or if you've had jobs that's like a research intensive job, you can use a professional references at that point, but we do highly encourage academic letters of references. Now, writing sample is only for PhD applicants. Now, a writing sample is 25, we only require about 25 pages of a writing sample. And this can be anything, either like a thesis that you've written as an undergrad or a master's student, or if you've done a term paper that you've done really well, that is representative of your research, then you can use that as a writing sample. We also require a CV, a resume, and that's to cover any sort of like work experience. If, for example, you've worked as a campaign manager, during elections or anything like that, any sort of like a relevant experience would be helpful. Now, GRE is required for PhD students. Now, uh, GRE is important, especially for a PhD, because it's the only arm's length examination that we would have, right? And like sometimes we have to deal with like transcript and grade inflations and everything like that. So the GRE is sort of like the it's the reliable information in terms of your aptitude in taking some of the graduate work, right?
Chris,
Now, yeah,
we're getting some questions on this. Just to be clear, yeah, you have to submit the GRE if you do not have a Canadian degree. If you
that's
have
right.
a Canadian degree, you don't have to submit it, but we would like to see it for PhD for sure. MA, we don't really, it's ideal, but it's not needed. American degree, you have to submit the GRE.
That's right. And for students who are applying to the U.S., I think most institutions in the U.S. are requiring GRE. So it's something that we encourage you to take and also to prepare for it, right? Now, if your degree is also uh, not from an institution that is a fully English speaking institution, we also require a English proficiency exam, either TOEFL or IELTS. Um, you know, just one of them. You don't need to submit both. So you can choose whether TOEFL or IELTS, depending on which one is more convenient for you to take.
Can I just jump in on that, because we got a
Mhm.
question earlier in the chat. You have to submit this because that is a rule at UBC.
That's correct.
That
Yeah,
is, you will not be admitted to graduate study at UBC if you do not pass the English language proficiency. This is not a departmental requirement. This is a university-wide requirement. So if they say in your applicant you have to submit it, you have to submit it. You won't, even if we accept you as a department, you will not be enrolled as a graduate student unless you satisfy this university requirement.
that's correct. Yeah, it's an institutional requirement. So this is UBC is quite inflexible about this requirement. Right? Now, in the application form, for some of you who've already seen that, there will also be like a tab where you can select which faculty that you're interested in working with, right? And you can also mention them in your statement of intent. I mean, it's not a hard requirement to identify it, but if you have someone that you've identified as you want to be working with, then all the more the better. Now, that being said, there's no need for you to contact faculty members prior to applying for the program, right? In fact, at that point, we say, uh, the faculty members themselves, even if they said, "Oh, I'm willing to work with you," well, they don't really have. It still goes through the admissions process, right? You're free to email faculty members, but it's not a requirement, right? And here are the application deadlines if you're applying for the PhD program. The PhD deadline is a little bit earlier. It's in December 15, 2022. And if you're applying for MA, it's going to be in January 2023. And with that, we're just going to do the Q&A session. But before that, let me just, um, let me see. Okay, I think we are, okay, I'm just going to stop the recording here for a moment.